Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Dizzycast, a de-stressing Dizzy, as this month our focus is all about stress and how to help manage it. First off, we're going to be joined by the lovely Amy, who's going to be telling us about her life with MS so far, and also how it's set her on a journey to discovery with Batch Flowers and how this has enhanced and improved her life. Then we're going to be joined by Jen and Robert, where we're going to be discussing our own experience with stress and how we help to manage these. We would just like to mention that unfortunately me and Dizzy are not healthcare professionals, so please be aware that even though we're discussing ideas that work for us, they might not work for everyone, and before starting anything new or doing anything new, it's always a good idea just to have a quick chat with your doctor to discuss it. Having said that, we really hope that some of these ideas are able to help you as well, and we hope that you enjoy the show. See you in a minute. Bye! Hi Amy, and thank you for joining us on Dizzycast.
Hello Heather, thanks for having me.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Struggling a bit with the heat, but otherwise I'm pretty good, yeah.
Oh, it's so hot and humid at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to it starting to cool down, but they're saying it's going to be a heat wave next week.
Yeah, I'm going to lay low next week.
That's what I'm going to be doing. It's going to be fan and the magical spray and bed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're on to chat to us just a little bit about yourself and also Batch Flowers. And how people can find out about them, and also a bit of information about how they can help people that are maybe feeling stressed at the moment. So to get us started, when were you diagnosed with MS, just so we can find out a bit about you?
Okay, so I was diagnosed with relapsing and remitting MS in August 2013. It was probably, to be honest, I'm not great with dates. I kind of don't try to, have my anniversary or anything.
Don't
so
worry.
I can't. Yeah, I can't tell you exactly, but I reckon it was about maybe 6 or 7 years before that when I actually had my first episode. So I had quite a serious relapse and I was in hospital, and I reckon that was about 2006, but it was a good 6 or 7 years later before I was diagnosed.
Oh, that's ages.
Yeah, but to be honest, I was quite lucky. I would say, although it took about a year after that relapse to kind of completely returned to normal, I did go, I would say, a good 7 years. It might have even been a little bit longer, with kind of, not really any symptoms. I guess looking back, there was like some clumsiness, some little things,
so
but
you
nothing.
Down to like every day though, don't you? You don't actually link it to anything. You just think, oh, that's life.
Yeah, and I did have quite a big stress breakdown, but I changed jobs, so I thought it was that. But looking back, I did have another relapse in that time. But I mean, the time between was quite big, and I was also lucky that I would say I actually returned to living quite a normal life, so it was quite a while before I was diagnosed, to be honest.
And then what happened like the 6-7 years later?
Well, it was kind of, like I said, looking back, there was, I would say, another relapse. So if I would have gone to the doctors, I probably would have got diagnosed maybe 5 years later, maybe 6 rather than 7, maybe more. Like I said, I haven't got the exact dates, but that's rough. But the diagnosis in the 2013 was, I was at work, and it was probably the week, it went on for about a week. I just felt like I was getting really forgetful, and I kind of would get in my car and couldn't remember how to drive home. Yeah, like stupid things. I was teaching this new guy at work how to do the job, and I just felt like I was just forgetting things, and just kind of, when you just don't feel right, you're just a little bit...
Yeah, you just know something's a bit off.
Yeah, something's a bit off. And I suppose because it was so long between that big, massive relapse that I had when I was in hospital, and there was nothing really, I wasn't told it could be MS or anything. I suppose I just put it at the back of my mind. So I never linked the two, really. And so I suppose I just felt like I was having another sort of stress breakdown, really, because my job was so stressful, and like I said, I'd had this one probably a couple of years prior and sort of ignored it and just thought I'd had a bit of a meltdown at work, sort of thing. And so anyway, it sort of went to pins and needles in my right hand, and then my whole right side went numb. I had like what I now know as an MS hug. So I was in a lot of pain around kind of the rib cage on the right hand side. And I was living away from home at the time. I was living in a house share, and I kind of went round my mum and dad's for tea that night after work, and mum went to hug me, and I just sort of winced where I was in so much pain, and she was like, what on earth is going on? This isn't normal. And that's when I was just like, oh, do you know what, I don't feel very well. I've got these pins and needles, but it's probably nothing. I'm just stressed, I'm tired, rah, rah, rah. Went up to the walk-in centre, and straight away said to me, no, this is all the symptoms together with looking at your history, I would say, of MS. And that was
so
it.
new.
Yeah, it was just sort of whirlwind. That was sort of about 11 o'clock at night in a walking
No.
centre. Yeah, and then I'd say within the next 2 days I was in the hospital. I was having all these tests, and I would say by the end of the week it was definitely diagnosed as MS, and that was it really.
Well, that was quick though.
Yeah, like I said, it was really short between the relapses, but once, you know, all the stuff started coming together, all the jigsaw sort of started, the pieces were fitting, the process was quite quick with the diagnosis.
So how does your MS like mainly affect you now?
So I would say mine's quite weird really. In fact, my neurologist said to me that I'm not textbook MS in many ways, because I tend to get, so if you look at the worst case scenario, so the obvious when I relapsed, I tend to get right side paralysis, which can be apparently quite uncommon to have it on one side all the time. But I usually do get right side paralysis, so that includes I lose the use of my arms, my hands. If you looked at me, I look like I have a stroke. In fact, every time an ambulance man does come out, they're like, "Oh no, query stroke," and I'm like, "No, not query stroke. I've got MS. Like, this is the drill, mate. This is how we do it."
The stroke is normally one side, isn't it?
Yeah, but it looks like it's all, my mouth drops. I can't eat. I can't talk.
So you have like all the classic symptoms.
Yeah, all the classic symptoms, and it's all on the right side. So like, I can't lift any of my right side. I can't take care of myself. I can't feed myself. I can't cook. I can't walk. I can't do, basically I'm in quite a vegetative state. When it's relapses, there usually are triggers. Like, I mean, we'll get onto it obviously a bit later, but things like stress, if I've overdone it, if I've done too much, like the weather affects me, all these sorts of things. I find my food, if I eating too much sugar, and at the moment I'm terrible with my eating, and that's really affecting my symptoms. So I find there's sort of a lot of triggers, but everyday wise, if I'm out of a relapse, then I think what I find harder than those things that scare everybody else, so when I relapse, everybody else around me gets scared because it's visible. So my family gets scared, and all these sorts of things. But for me, the worst bits are the bits I live with every day. So I have so many invisible symptoms. So my worst is fatigue, and fatigue is actually the reason why I don't work, why I don't have like relationships, I don't have friendships, I don't have much of a social life, because I've had to become quite solitary, because I'd say my everyday MS is worse in many ways, because it is the kind of fatigue, it is the cognitive problems, it is the pins and needles, the spasms, the pain, the weakness. I struggle a lot with my speech. So I was telling you earlier, I get a lot of slurred speech, a lot of stuttered speech. Sometimes I lose my speech completely. So sort of lots of things like that, really.
Yeah, I think because they're the day in, day out symptoms, they're the ones that are with you all the time as well, aren't they?
And they're invisible. Like I was saying to you before we kind of started chatting on here, I struggle with kind of, a big part of my journey is learning to be vulnerable, to be honest, and
it's hard though.
Yeah, and I think I was my journey wasn't the best, to be honest, because I got diagnosed and I found out that I got put in the wrong tray, so I never got picked up by the services, I never got picked up by the MS nurses, I didn't see a neurologist for 2 years after
diagnosis. That's awful though.
Yeah, so it's been like this real fight to kind of get the support, and I think by the time I saw someone, I was done. I was just like, I had sort of no faith in the NHS. I had no faith. That sounds really horrible to say, because I loved them as an NHS, but I mean, MS wise, I had no faith. And I kind of, in those 2 years, I felt like I went on such a journey that I kind of find my own ways of managing. And so all that they tell me now is kind of a little bit too little too late, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
You've had to like muddle through and find all your own answers.
Yeah, and I think for that reason, it's quite difficult. Yeah, I think it's quite, I find it quite difficult to be vulnerable, to ask for help. I get a bit fed up of explaining all my symptoms because mine are so invisible. And then as a result, I have been quite discriminated against. I get judged quite quickly because I present so well. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's what counts against me, really.
And it is really hard for people to understand, because it is one of those things that unless you have it, I don't really think people can completely understand what it's like. So when you're trying to explain fatigue and they say, oh yes, I've had a really long day and I'm really tired, and it's really hard to explain to people that is really, like, I understand you're really tired, but it's just not quite the same. Like, it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I feel like there are so many invisible symptoms that, you know, I'd also bore people to tears if I sat someone down and told them everything I'm experiencing. God, we won't get anywhere. Do you know what I mean? We'd be talking about the same thing. It would be like Groundhog Day. And I think that's the thing. You just get really good at it, kind of coping with it, I guess. I guess that's what I've tried to do, is learn to cope with it and to find ways to kind of live with it. And I guess for me, being positive is a huge part of my management plan. And that kind of, whilst it really helps me, it also massively counts against me, because I do get judged a lot, you know, because I do present so well.
Yeah, and then it's another thing that you've got to deal with as well.
Yeah, and it's made me, like I said, it's made me go quite solitary, because I kind of just feel like I can't waste any more precious spoons trying to explain to people. Do you know what I mean?
People, but you have got Audrey, your dog.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I got my best mate. I don't need anyone else.
She's so adorable.
She's a babe, isn't she?
She's so sweet. When I see the pictures, I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, she gets it, so that's all that matters.
That kind of leads on to our next question, when you were saying about the things that can trigger off your MS. So you have found that stress can be an issue. How do you find that it does affect your MS overall, though?
So I guess personally, the biggest, experiment that I had with knowing that stress was an issue was about, well, what must it be now? I reckon it's 3 years ago in August I moved back with my parents. So it was about I don't know. It's hard to get the timings right, but I guess I was with my partner for a couple of years. So maybe around 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I basically was living with my partner at the time. I was working full time, then I dropped down to part time, but I was in a really stressful job. I was a support worker, so ironically I was helping a lot of people in the situation I'm now in. My relationship was really toxic. It just wasn't a healthy relationship, and I was living about 25 miles away from my family, and it was just really, oh God, the most stressful situation you could think of. You know, like my home life sucked, my work life sucked.
So you haven't got any place that's just calm that you can relax in?
And I had nothing in between, because I think this is what sort of highlighted it for me, that I would say I was relapsing every weekend, every other. You know, it would be really common for me to come in from work and not be able to talk to my partner, so that would cause issues and arguments. It was just, you know, I felt like my MS was rapidly deteriorating because of the stress, and I was being discriminated at work. They were trying to get rid of me because my MS was becoming a problem. It was just so stressful that the whole process was just, I was having massive flare-ups. You know, I couldn't even walk around my own flat. I was crawling around my flat because I couldn't get up and down stairs. You know, it was just bad times, you know, really bad times. And I think that was the turning point for me, when I realised actually how much stress really does, I personally feel, affect your MS. Then, like I said earlier, my personality comes into it, where I'm not very good at being vulnerable and showing people, because I think the bit I missed out earlier was what happened with the being forgotten in the system meant that I think I'd put so much trust in it, and I told so many people in the beginning that I had MS, that it started really counting against me, and I felt then I became like defined by it, if that makes sense. And then it became no longer my thing to tell people, because it sort of started spreading like wildfire that I had MS. So I went the other way, and then I've stopped telling people. Do you know what I mean? And I've stopped kind of, I guess, asking for help. So the stress element of it made it more obvious. I couldn't hide that I couldn't walk and talk. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't hide that I couldn't pick up cutlery, or that I was needing to go to bed like 2-3 times a day because I was so exhausted. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that's the thing with the stress. You can't hide stuff so much, because it was actually making my sort of more visible symptoms, if you like, my more sort of disabling symptoms. They were just more obvious. Do you see what I mean? I wasn't able to hide them. So,
and then that causes more stress, because you're so desperately trying to hide them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, your personality does come into it. If you're someone who's quite proud and you don't want everyone knowing, the fact that you can't hide it makes you then have to stay inside a lot more. And I did withdraw. You know, I felt like, to be honest, like this sounds so dramatic, but I felt like I was dying. You know, I became a shadow of my former self, like not the person you're talking to now. Do you know what I mean? I was just, Yeah, I was not in a good place at all. And I do feel like that all escalated really from stress, you know?
But I think it's just because there was so much stress, so I'm really like
Yeah.
not surprised that it did have that impact on you.
Yeah. Like I said, I just felt like I was working, I was living to sort of go to work to keep up this pretense and to keep my partner happy and to contribute to the house. And then I was trying to run the house so that I looked like I was kind of contributing, and I wasn't, which was ridiculous because I was financially contributing. So I shouldn't have needed to make up for it in any other way. But I guess, yeah, I was trying to appear too normal, and the stress of all of that was just,
means that your health gets like pushed to the side then as well, because you're worried about all this other stuff, even though the health is causing the problems.
Yeah, it's never really about me and my MS, and I think for me that was the point when I realised that stress is like a huge contributing factor to kind of your MS, really, I think, and the progression of it.
But you got yourself out of those situations.
Yes, I did. Yeah, sorry, that was so depressing, everyone. Sorry.
No, it's fine, but we'll go to the more uplifting.
Yeah, let's go and uplift.
But no, I think like a lot of people, myself included, we've all gone through those darker times. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
Part of it, isn't it? It's part of the process.
Yeah, it's just part of life, and I think like we all get in situations where the stress affects the MS, and it does feel really, it's hard to get yourself out of that. In those situations, kind of like be able to say, right, I need to step out of this job or this relationship or whatever's
all of the above
going on.
Yeah.
So what got you on your journey with Batch Flowers?
So I would say probably the turning point, like a lot of people, I started with Rescue Remedy, which I think a lot of people don't realise is part of the actual Batch Flower system.
Yeah, because I didn't.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't. Loads of people don't. I would say I used Rescue Remedy, which is more commonly known as. There's lots of other names for it, but that's the most commonly known. And I started with Rescue Remedy in my teens when I took it for exams. I took it on my driving test, you know, all the common help with flying, all the common things. And then it was a good 10 years later, I would say. So about 5 years ago, when I was in said horrible relationship and situation, I went to Glastonbury on like a bit of a retreat. And I sort of thought, you know, when in Rome, I'm going to treat myself to some therapies. And I wanted to pick therapies I'd never tried before, because I'm a bit of a hippie at heart, you know, and I've always been into alternative therapies, and I've always kind of dabbled in crystals, in tarots and spiritual things, you know, but I'd never had some therapy. So I tried kinesiology, and one of the things she would do towards the end was she would have all the 38 Batch Flower remedies listed, and then she would go through each one, like run her finger down it, and when my body responded, she would give me that remedy.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and what I realised was as soon as I took that remedy, I just felt like it was like someone literally picked me up and shook me, and it was like, right, I need to sort myself out. You know, it was like this light bulb just went off, and it was to the point where I nearly even done like a Shirley Valentine, and I didn't go back home. I remember phoning my partner and said, like, I'm not coming home, I'm staying in Glastonbury. And she was like, that's not the deal. You know, I bought you this as a Christmas present. You're not come home. So I did go back home. But I think that was like the light bulb moment for me. And I kind of, after that point, I kept going back to Glastonbury to see this kinesiologist for sort of quite regular sessions, and I realised that the bit I was more excited about was the remedies. Like the bit I wanted her to give me was a different flower remedy every time, and that was kind of the start of the journey. But I think where it then led me on to actually training was that I think this is sort of where the remedies get a bit confusing. A lot of people, a lot of practitioners will use them in practice. So it's really common for kinesiologists, herbalists, naturopaths, even counsellors. You know, it's really common for people to use them. But what they tend to do is they're either self-taught or they do small modules on a course to learning a bigger thing, if that makes sense. The problem comes that they can't obviously always tell you through their own I guess expertise or learning the complexities of the system. They can't kind of tell you what the remedy's for. And the other issue as well with that sort of thing is, when I went on to do my training, they sort of told you this, is they actually advise under the kind of, basically just in a nutshell, I'm what's called a Batch Foundation registered practitioner. So I've done a Batch Centre approved qualification, like I've sat exams, I've had to do case studies, you know, it's basically my my passion, if you like, and I've kind of dedicated all my studying to this one thing. You know, it's not just a module for me, it's kind of a way of life. And what they say is that if you work in this way, if you're a batch approved practitioner, then you sign up to say that it's not used through intuitive means. So when you use kinesiology, for example, you're working deeper into the body. So you're, you know, how can I explain it? She sort of basically tested my muscles and prescribed me, if you like, a remedy that she couldn't obviously really tell me a great deal about without looking at a book. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, the problem was that I couldn't link that feeling to how I was feeling. So looking back, I probably wasn't really that remedy that I was given. So that's where it gets a bit confusing, that although that was what got me into it and I'm eternally grateful for it, it kind of probably isn't the best way to get into them, if that makes sense.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, sorry, I probably made it a bit complicated, but some of the other questions might explain it a little bit more.
No, I think I do understand it.
Yeah, but that's how I basically, in a nutshell, that's how I got into it. And I just was so passionate. Every time she prescribed a new sort of remedy to me, that was the bit I realised I was more interested in. So I went away and kind of got some books and bought as many of each week I'd sort of, like saving up your pocket money, I'd go down and buy a different remedy from the health shop every week as soon as I had enough money.
And it must be quite exciting as well.
Oh, so exciting. Like, I felt like it took me ages to get my set, really, because like I said, I would go down and buy a different one every time I had a bit of spare money. And and then that was it then. Once I sort of found the course, I'd done all of my courses in quite quick succession, really, because I was just addicted, you know.
That's lovely though, now that that's like what you're working in, that it's something that you have such a passion for.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how I lived without them.
So how many remedies are there?
So there's 38 altogether. There's 39 if you include Rescue Remedy, because Rescue Remedy is the only combination remedy.
Yeah, it's
so all
a mix,
the others,
isn't it?
That's right. So all the others are single remedies, and then the 39th, so Rescue Remedy, contains 5 of those 38 remedies. So there's 5 single remedies in that Rescue Remedy, which have been selected for kind of their use in like an emergency situation, you know. So that's why you might utilise those 5 remedies. But other than that, there's no, if you use the system as intended, there should be no pre-mixed blends.
It's
you know,
just the Rescue Remedy one.
Just the Rescue Remedy is for generic use, and outside of that, it should always be bespoke. It should always be tailored to the person in question.
All of my knowledge is just the Rescue Remedy, because when I was young, my mum used to give it to me if there was any stressful situation or if anything had happened. So, you know, if something had happened that would give you a bit of a shock, like maybe you'd fallen over and hurt yourself.
Yeah, perfect. That's what it's
She
for,
would give
yeah.
it to me for that sort of thing. So I really just thought
Lucky
it was
you.
Rescue Remedy, but I thought that was it. That was the only thing they did. Can you just tell us a little bit about them and how they do work?
Yes, so, as I say, in a nutshell, there's 38 of them. They all derive from nature, but unlike a lot of kind of other herbal medicine, they don't contain the plant itself. So, for example, if you were into homeopathy or you went to a herbalist, they're going to mix you a tincture that contains the plant. But the remedies actually harness the energy of the plant rather than the plant itself. So in terms of MS use, this is why I think is so brilliant, because you cannot get any side effects from it because they don't contain the plant. Like, we're here to support you. We're not just here to give you the remedies that help you. We're here to teach you about the system along the way. So the ideal is that you become really empowered, and then at some point you feel a bit more confident to use the system alone, just sort of tapping into seeing a therapist now and again. And I think that's so rare, particularly in chronic illness. It is so rare to go to somebody who says, I hear you, here's a safe space that you can talk, and more importantly, let's kind of decide what goes in your mix together. You know, I just don't think that happens anymore. I think when you get ill, that gets taken away from you, and you go to a series of practitioners who tell you what to do and how to manage it, and you don't really get listened to, and you're certainly not involved in your care plan. I personally don't think. What we want to try and do is get you to understand the feeling and the remedy and the relief that it brings you. So by by treating feelings as they present, you then know how it feels to be, for example, like I said, if you weren't feeling confident or you had a fear of failure, those sorts of things would indicate larch. So then if you took larch, then what's going to happen is you can, by sipping it, by being present with the remedy rather than rushing the whole process, you're going to start to feel those feelings lift. Because you're in the process, if that makes sense.
Later on in our discussion, we're talking about stress. So is there any remedies that are good for stress if someone's thinking about trying one out that they could see how they got on with?
The only thing to kind of in a nutshell to take away from this is that personally, if you want to use the batch system as originally intended, the way that in which you get the simplicity of it and the empowerment of it is to treat as you go, is to treat kind of person-centered, as feelings present, and to get away from this whole lumping together with a generic blend. So I wouldn't be able to tell you specifically a single remedy for stress, because I do think, like I said, it depends what is your trigger for stress, you know, what is the feeling behind the stress. But as a general kind of to help people, rescue remedy is always a good starter. You know, it really is. I would suggest carrying rescue remedy around in your bag. That's what I do, because it's good for, like I said, not only you, but all the family. So if you have children, it helps calm children down. If you have pets that are anxious when they go to the vets or there's firework night, they can take it. And in terms of MS, it's really good for things like, so looking at scenarios like an MRI. Rock Rose is one of the active remedies in rescue remedy, and Rock Rose is the remedy for panic, for fear, you know, the real extreme of that. So that's going to be why it's going to help in an MRI situation. I would say also another active ingredient in there is Star of Bethlehem. So that remedy would help with shock, with trauma, with grief. So things like news such as disease progression. People that aren't perhaps even accepted their diagnosis would benefit from taking Star of Bethlehem. And then things like clematis is one of the remedies in rescue remedy, and that really helps with feelings of lightheadedness, feeling faint. To be honest, like I said, you're not really allowed to say the symptoms because we look what's behind it. But if there was ever a remedy for MS, clematis has got to be up there, because, you know, it is lightheaded, forgetfulness, clumsiness. You know, the people that read the same line in a book about 10 times because they haven't took it in, can't concentrate on the telly. I mean, God, how many MS symptoms have we got to mention? Do you know what I mean? There's loads. Yeah. And so those 3 individual remedies alone are in rescue remedy. So for scenarios, common MS scenarios that are likely to cause stress, I would say rescue remedy is a really good one for just calming everything down. I can't swear by that enough. It's kind of, it really is a good one to keep in your bag. Silly things like I've given it to my neighbour who gave blood and was really lightheaded, and it kind of brought her back. I've given it to a little bee that kind of, you know, when you see bees in your conservatory or in your garden, yeah, you know, when they get all like disorientated, give them some rescue remedy. I've given it to Audrey like all the time. So it's such a universally accessible remedy, and it's got so many uses. You know, it really is one that you should just keep in your first aid kit, really. And in terms of stress management, it really will get you through any kind of heightened times of difficulty. And I really would suggest that if you don't book a consultation with me or anyone else, you know, or you don't feel like this is enough to get you into the remedies, just stick with rescue remedy, because it's better than nothing. Do you know what I mean? It really is.
Brilliant, thank you. Can I let you just tell everyone where people can find you?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. So my business is called Honeysuckle Healing. Honeysuckle is one of the remedies, and I've got a website which is www.honeysucklehealing.co.uk. I'm also on Facebook, Honeysuckle Healing UK, and on Twitter. What am I on Twitter? Honeysuckle BS3, I think. Honeysuckle BS3, I think. Yeah, and basically I offer consultations. So I don't do it outside of the UK because I don't know how it works with sending in the remedies into other countries, because some different countries obviously are a bit funny about receiving them. But I offer consultations to anyone in the UK because I can do them by Skype, phone, email, you know, however anyone prefers to speak, and one-to-ones in the Bristol area. Yeah, and basically I'm happy to help anyone as much as I can. I also write a newsletter every month where I write a different focus on one of the remedies, so you can sign up to that on my website, and then it will just tell you each month a little bit more about why you might take that remedy. So I'm hoping that together with all this kind of information, I'm giving people insights into what remedies they might like to start with, or what may in turn bring them to me if they need a bit more advice. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Bye.
So after returning home from the donkey hospital, Dizzy spent the next couple of weeks waiting for the inner ear infection to get better. Even though she was a little less dizzy, she was still very wobbly and was not able to do much more than rest. This went on for a few weeks more, and by this point Dizzy was beginning to get suspicious. She had been to the doctors a number of times, but they just kept reassuring her that it was nothing to worry about. By now though, Dizzy was also having numbness over most of her body, her eyesight was blurry, and she kept feeling like someone was giving her a rather firm hug. She liked cuddles, but not like these ones. She also kept feeling really lightheaded, and when she looked down she felt like she was getting an electric shock right down to her little hooves. Dizzy was beginning to suspect that an inner ear infection couldn't really be causing all of these symptoms. With no answers coming from the doctors, Dizzy decided to take matters into her own little hooves and looked on the donkey net. Dizzy wasn't sure what to expect, but she was shocked to see that the donkey net only gave one possible answer to all of her symptoms: MS. Hi and welcome to this month's Dizzy discussion. As usual, we're joined by the lovely Jen and Robert. Hi you two, how are you both doing?
Hello.
Hi.
This month we're going to be discussing all things about stress and MS. So just to get us started off, why is stress such an important factor with MS and what is your understanding of it? I don't know if Jen, you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's linked with my MS. My understanding of it is that if you're stressed, it can cause inflammation in the brain, which I assume is when your immune cells kind of attack your brain, and obviously inflammation isn't very good for MS. So I think it triggers certain cells that then lead to the inflammation happening. I know I certainly feel my symptoms worsen even like during short-lived periods of stress, so like day-to-day stress. So yeah, I think that's my understanding. I don't know if I have the biology bit absolutely right, but I think it does create some kind of immune response if you're stressed.
That does make sense, because I didn't actually have any idea why it did cause like flare-ups with MS.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember reading somewhere that was the reason. Like it kind of triggers some kind of cells, which then trigger the the inflammatory response. So I think that's what it is, but I can't be 100% sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty much that, increased blood flow, a little bit of adrenaline because of the stress, and all those extra chemicals preparing you for something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that definitely, there's no doubt about it. If you're calm and relaxed and there's nothing happening, there's no impact. But suddenly when you have this surge of, I think it's the hormones really that are triggering the inflammation to get a little bit worse, or a lot worse, as the case may be.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also if it's triggering off the immune response, then that also leads to how people end up having relapses from it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does stress affect your MS? Has it ever caused flare-ups or a relapse?
I think for me, it definitely affects me. I mean, I notice it quite a lot day to day. I think just being a parent of two primary school age children kind of impacts on my stress. Yes, it's unavoidable. But like I really notice it, for example, if I'm having a little bit of an argument with the kids or telling them to do something and they're not listening to me, I can feel it's almost like the thing that I notice the most is that it really affects my kind of what we call cog fog. So I'll be trying to tell them off about something, but I won't be able to find the right word. And that kind of, I think, stresses me out even more because I think they're going to think I'm being silly, but I can't get the right word out. Or, for example, I had a meeting with work last week and I kind of thought of something and then it went out of my brain so quickly that I was sitting there being a bit silly, not kind of saying anything, and they were waiting on me talking, and I couldn't do it. So I think for me that my stress kind of impacts a lot of my word finding. I definitely have noticed as well that when I feel stressed, it kind of makes my kind of arms quite tingly, which sounds strange, but because my arms aren't really something that's massively affected by MS, but I kind of almost feel it like a buzzing sensation in my upper body when I get stressed. And interestingly, I was saying about work, how I've been having a meeting recently because they're going to terminate my employment. Obviously, the past few months have been quite stressful for me, and I actually had my first relapse in 13 years back in April. I had like right-sided numbness on my face for about a week, and I didn't even think it was relapse because it's been so long since I've had one, with me having secondary progressive. But yeah, my neurologist confirmed, and the only thing I can think is that it's linked to all this stress to do with work, because I don't always feel stressed in my brain, but I think it comes out of me physically, if that makes on like a physical way it comes out. So
yeah, because they say that we hold the stress in our body, so sometimes you might not even be aware that you're feeling stressed, but you're still slightly tensed up, or your body's still storing it with everything happening. And especially with something like work, it's quite prolonged as well, isn't it?
It is. I mean, interestingly, when I was younger and I was doing kind of my speech therapy course, I remember it was a really full-on course, really kind of intensive, because we did the kind of 4 years in 2. So it was a really intensive course, and I didn't feel particularly stressed. I actually quite liked the work and did it. But actually back then, this is when I was in my early 20s, I actually ended up having a couple of like little panic attacks, which I didn't realize were panic attacks until my dad was like, I think I've just had a panic attack, when he saw me have one. But again, I didn't feel it in my brain, but obviously it can come out physically, even if you mentally you're not fully feeling it. So
yeah, and I think especially if you've having stress for a long time, sometimes you don't start to realise that you are stressed because it just kind of becomes a normal.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
For me, I would think that emotional stress is probably the hardest one that impacts me the greatest. You know, general kind of work stress, yes, it does, but certainly emotional stress, when you think you're going up and down, kind of anxious about relations with people or family, or you know, that type of stuff, I find that particularly impacts.
Yeah, does it cause any flare-ups with you, Robert?
It does, definitely. Like it's interesting what you're saying then, Jen, about your arms. My hands actually feel like they're swelling up, like they've become big balloons with lots of tingles in my fingers and all that type of stuff. So that definitely happens. My fatigue certainly gets worse, and my walking tends to. But I have even things like a twitch in my eye that suddenly goes blah, blah, crazy.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I find that stress is for me is a major trigger for either relapse or just a kind of an exacerbation of what I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah, because I'm the same. We all have the hand thing, but mine go numb.
Okay.
So I'm sometimes not aware of it, and then I'll be driving and I'll realise I can't really feel the steering wheel. Yeah. Obviously, I know I'm driving, I know what I'm doing, but I'll suddenly think, oh, this isn't feeling quite right.
Yeah.
But it's weird how we all have hand symptoms, but it's all slightly different.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But mine's like the numbness and the fatigue as well. So I find, especially if I feel stressed in the evening, the next day I'll be absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
So I've kind of noticed a pattern between stressful day and then the next day I'll literally feel like I can hardly get out of bed after it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially like Robert was saying, with the emotional stress or just anything, it just kind of makes you feel just flat and like, it just kind of completely takes it out of you, doesn't it? Even if physically you haven't been doing very much.
Yeah.
And see,
I suppose it's the extra energy, but then it's quite tricky because I find that I'll start feeling stressed, but then I'll start feeling stressed about feeling stressed, knowing that it's setting off PMS.
Yeah, it's
and then it all kind of goes round and round and round, me getting more annoyed with myself, causing more stress, which is leading to more stress and more NF symptoms, which is causing more stress. So I find it quite difficult to actually get it under control as well.
Yeah, it's learning to break that cycle, but it's certainly there's no doubt about it. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Heather. and I feel it myself. It's, you get that knot in your stomach and you get anxious about it, and then you start thinking, is this going to get worse? And then it actually gets worse because you think it's going to get worse. And oh yeah,
it's so difficult to break out of it when that happens.
It's hard, but it's yeah. You see, the thing is, it's like we like Jen and myself, we've had MS for a long time, right? And it just becomes normal. That's just part of the cycle, I think.
Yeah, and I definitely find that that's kind of like the short term, and then if I have prolonged stress, like we were saying, Jen, then that's what leads to full relapses.
Yeah.
So when I've had like stressful periods, and I don't know why, but I read ages ago that someone said if you have a stressful period, then you have a little break, then the relapse hits, and that seems to always be true for me. So I'll have the stress, I'll come out of it and start thinking, oh, this is great, I'm feeling a little better, and then the relapse hits kind of 4 weeks afterwards. But I'm not sure why that is, what causes that.
That's interesting, isn't
it?
Yeah.
But mine definitely does always seem to follow that pattern.
Okay.
Wow. I wonder if it's because I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any kind of biological reason for that. But I don't know.
Because I always just start to think, oh, the stress is gone, I'm starting to feel better about life, and then it hits, and I just never know why that break kind of happens before the relapse. But there obviously maybe something, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. How do you think you are at controlling stress?
I think I'm better. I think I'm better than I was in the past. I think that, kind of as Robert said, I think I've had MS for so long that I've kind of had to almost work out a way to deal with it, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say I'm perfect at controlling it, but I know what I can do to try and control it. And I try to do that as much as possible. Sometimes life gets in the way of that, which is when I have these relapses, or there's things that you can't control in your life that's causing stress. But I do things to try and help it. For example, meditation and stuff. But I think for me, it's about recognizing how I'm feeling and then doing something about it as soon as I can. Whereas if I leave it, it just gets worse. But I think I'm just much more aware of when I feel stressed, and then I try and do something to alleviate it, really. I've learned to pace myself, but I can't always keep on top of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's true for all of us, but it is the MS that's definitely kind of like made you more aware of stress and how it affects you.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think, I mean, with me, my MS has really kind of come out over the past kind of 6-7 years, and that kind of that then correlates with me having young kids. So I don't know whether I would have been more aware of my stress, even if I didn't have MS. I mean, if you think about before I had kids, I had nothing really to be stressed about. My MS wasn't really particularly affecting me a lot. I didn't have lots of stressful times, but I think that as I've gotten older, maybe it's an age thing as well, I've kind of become better at listening to my body. And I certainly think MS has kind of helped me to listen to my body. I don't know if I would have been aware of what my body was doing if I didn't have MS.
Yeah, you can't ignore things as well when you have MS.
No.
It's interesting because I was horrible at managing it when I was younger, because I just used to push the anxiety away, or I tried to ignore it, and never actually fully dealing with it. You know what I mean? So that I think was compounding, and I was very bad at dealing with the emotional side of it, and the anxiety of it, and the stress of it, and almost kind of running away from it, or trying to be busy doing something else and trying to hope that I could claw myself out of it without recognizing the fact that I was stressed.
It's a big thing to deal with, though.
Yeah, and it was just like, I remember we had young kids and busy work and, tired and fatigued, and I would just try to plow my way through it, which I think now in retrospect was a huge mistake. I could have dealt with it so much better, but I just didn't have the tools in my armory to fight it. I just was really bad. But I think now, being that bit older, having help, actually, because I see a psychologist maybe every 3 months, something like that. And I found when he told me about the meditation and the journaling and all that type of stuff, that has helped hugely. Absolutely. It's been massive, actually. And my partner has been very good at helping me to, recognize that I am feeling emotions and to actually express them. And that really takes the pressure off in a lot of ways. And so I have found now ways of dealing with it. And I think the first thing is acknowledging that it's actually happening is the first thing. And then trying to pick at it until you realize that what you're being stressed about or anxious about is not really as big as you think it is, I think. And that's where the meditation, Jen, for me, I'd be horrible if I didn't have the meditation. And I do now every week, say 4 or 5 days of the week, and it's about 30 minutes that I'm meditating. And
wow, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's long. And then I write about all the crap that comes up afterwards in my journal, and it's very cleansing in a way. And you suddenly realize, God, I was anxious about that all day yesterday, and I didn't need to be. It really isn't as bad as you think it is. And you've been in situations like that before, and somehow you've come through it, and it hasn't been catastrophic. So, and that really has helped. And I now know if I'm starting to feel that knot in my stomach, which I get, it's kind of all the time. But now I know how to get rid of it, which is amazing.
Really good. And I think it's all a learning process, isn't it? Because I know you were saying how you weren't good at managing it before, but it takes time to find these techniques and things that work for you.
Oh, absolutely. But you also need to have, I think, the courage to change what you're doing.
And the way you think, like acknowledging these emotions is quite a big step to take.
Certainly for a man, because we're not meant to be emotional. We're not meant to feel sad or whatever. Anger is okay, that's acceptable, but all the other emotions really you shouldn't have them, but you do. They're there, and to acknowledge that you have them actually really, really helps. And I think certainly as a man, that's a difficult thing to come to terms with in a way.
Yeah, and giving yourself permission to properly feel these feelings, because they are just natural and part of being human, but it's making that change and telling your brain that it's okay to accept these and release them and process them, isn't it?
That's it, but it has been a revelation to me, this. And if I had only known it when I was like 25, 26, God, the world would have been different. But it's interesting. It's interesting. My son started an internship, and part of the training that they're doing for his work, it's one of these IT companies, they're actually doing mindfulness training as part of their training for the job.
Oh, that's really good.
Wow.
And
that's really good.
That's really, I thought, that's amazing. And journaling and mindfulness techniques and breathing techniques, they're actually teaching them as part of the induction process. I think, wow.
Oh, that's so useful, because so often that side of things just gets overlooked.
Absolutely. But they're doing it apparently because it increases productivity.
Yes,
I'm sure it does, though.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I have a friend who is a teacher, and she's down in London though, and she is also a mindfulness practitioner, and she goes into schools and does it with different schools, and the feedback is absolutely brilliant about how it impacts on the kids and their work and their stress and their bullying and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a shame that it has to be the big places. Like, I don't think they would do it around. I live in a tiny little town. But it's something that I think would be so useful for any child. I look at my kids, and they get all stressed out about, friendships and things. And I think just the tools to work out stress and your thoughts would be so useful, even from such a young age, that a lot of the time it can, like you're saying, Robert, why do you have to wait until, you're in your 30s or whatever, or your 40s to work it all out? It's a shame that we're not giving kids the tools really early to be able to work that out for themselves.
Yeah, because then they'll know it from an early age, because otherwise it is just down to us to hope that we get on a path that leads us to finding that out.
That's right, yeah.
But I do love those mindfulness courses. I've seen a couple of them on the news with the children, and the children always look so happy and relaxed after it. I think that's so lovely.
The thing is, I think it needs to be someone else. Like I always, when I do, my kids know I do meditation and stuff. And I remember my little boy was getting all stressed out one night before bed, and I was like, "Well, why don't you do this like 3-minute bed thing?" And he's like, he's your typical 10-year-old. He's like, "Don't want to do it." And I was like, "Well, make you feel better." And actually, he did do it, and it did make him feel better. But you know.
I know what you mean. I think it's easier if an outside person's coming into the school to do it,
exactly.
and then they're all doing it together as well.
Yeah, that's right. Otherwise, it's his mum just being annoying and hippie.
Oh. So we've touched on meditation and mindfulness. What other tips do you have for de-stressing?
Well, actually, I just wanted to say something to Robert, because he mentioned journaling. I think it was the last podcast or maybe the podcast before, and I've started to do a little bit of it. I don't think I've done it as much as I should, though, listening to what you're saying. You do every time after you meditate. Maybe I need to get more in a habit of doing it. But I would say that definitely has helped. I used to keep a diary when I was tiny. Well, not tiny, a teenager. And I remember at that time how that really helped me to get my thoughts out and to feel better. So I've started to do more of that. And kind of linked to kind of meditation, I suppose. I try and get on with my yoga because for me, I try and do yoga for stretching, but actually the breathing part helps to calm my mind as well. So I guess for me, it's about doing preventative stuff as much as possible so that I can kind of avoid the stress, or at least deal with the stress better when it happens. And I think I was having a think about this. I think it sounds a bit silly, but I think for me, putting routines into place helps me to deal with my stress. So, for example, around the kids or around keeping the house tidy or whatever, I think it's almost like for me, it's working out what makes me stressed. And it sounds silly to say a dirty house makes me stressed, but I have a really big thing where I think if I have like a tidy house, it's like a tidy mind. I don't feel as like everything's just building up. So I kind of try and have a little bit of routine of when I tidy, and routines with the kids as well. So they know that in the morning they have to have done X, Y, Z before we go to school. And it kind of takes away the stress of having to keep telling them things, if that makes sense. So I'm, again, not building up my stress by having to get them to do things that I want them to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like we have like even little simple things, like a big thing at the minute is my little boy wanted to play the Xbox, whereas we've said, okay, you can do it on this day, and this day. And so now he knows we don't have these stressful arguments anymore. Well, not as often anyway.
That's a good idea, though. Then it's set out. Everyone knows.
Exactly. They kind of know what they have to do, and then it kind of avoids these arguments, which for me are the big stressful things. Because I wouldn't say I feel particularly, I feel like I've just lived with my MS for so long. I kind of have almost accepted that I just need to get on with it and do as much as I can to keep as healthy as possible. But it's just the outside things, I think, that stress me out, which if I can control them through things like routines and planning, obviously without going too over the top, because things might have variables and things might change. But if I can just keep control that way, then that then helps keep my stress levels a bit more simple, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do that as well. I have things quite routine, which makes me feel a lot more, I suppose, safer in a way and comfortable.
Yeah, just organised and predictable, I suppose.
Yeah. I like predictability. But I'm the same, because meditation I'm still struggling with, so I am trying it, and I'm good for about 5, maybe 10 minutes. Robert, I'm jealous of your 30 minutes of being able to meditate. But I still get to that point where it just, sometimes it seems to give my brain more time to worry. Like, oh great, we're quiet, so I can just worry even more than normal now. And I'm one of those people, I still haven't quite got hold of that. You know, they tell you, if you think about something or you start worrying, to kind of let it go as like a bubble or in a cloud or something. And I'm quite good at doing that if someone's talking me through it. Mm-hmm. But if I'm by myself doing it, I find that very difficult. And then it's another thing that leads to me feeling more stressed because I'm not doing it properly. I'm like, I can't do it. It's making me stressed. I'm a failure at meditation.
You know, sorry for interrupting, Heather.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, because I really struggled at first, and I went onto YouTube and looked up self-hypnosis, and I found this self-hypnosis for stress relief or something. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll kind of send it to you or whatever. But
that'd be really good.
It was really good because she talks the whole way, and it's about visualization, I suppose. So I think there was one bit where she walks down on the beach, and then this big rain cloud comes, and you have to think about all your worries go into this rain cloud, and then it kind of bursts apart and the sunshine comes out. It sounds really whatever, but I remember
that sounds really nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. So it's not meditation, but again, it's just relaxing and chilling out. So I'll see if I can find that for you.
Thank you, because that's the sort of thing that I react much better to when I've got things to distract my mind in a peaceful, relaxed way.
Yes.
I also find myself that finding things when you're getting stressed, it's so easy to get consumed, as you say, Heather, by what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
I like to. There's two things that I really do. One is find the things that are actually going well in my life. So finding those things and saying, okay, this is going well, like it's a beautiful day, or I was able to do this, or I was climbing the stairs today, or whatever. So you find the things that are going well, but also that when I feel anxiety, I then say, well, if this actually does happen, what's the worst that's going to be? So
you sort of rationalize it.
Yeah, but exactly. So you go to the, well, this happens, and if that happens, then this negative thing will happen, and then eventually you'll realize, well, it's not really that awful, right? So, for example, I'm worried about whether I'll have enough money this month. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know every month there's a minimum amount of money that's coming into me because I'm on disability. Okay. So I've got this minimum level that comes in, and if I had no work at all, I didn't get paid for anything during the month, I still would survive. I'd still be able to pay my rent. I'd still be able to, eat. There'd still be enough heat in the house and all that type of stuff. So that's the worst it's going to be for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if this particular thing happens, I'm still not going to be bad. I'm just going to be inconvenienced a little bit. And I find by doing that, it's like pricking the balloon, and it just gets rid of the stress, because you go to the nth level and you find that, okay, maybe it's not so bad. Or by breaking down the problem, you say, well, if I did this, that might help. If I did this other thing, that might help too. And say, for example, with the job or having money, I say, well, say I do an online survey, or I phone this person up and they might give me a little bit of work, or I do this and I get a few euros here. And before you know it, you've kind of worked yourself out of the problem. By breaking it down into smaller and smaller bits, you say, well, I can tackle that bit. I can do something about that. And once you start feeling productive about it, or feeling that you can deal with one of the issues, suddenly the problem isn't as big anymore because you're able to do something. So those are the two main things that I do if I'm getting really worked up about something. They help an awful lot.
No, that is a good idea. I like that idea of sort of sitting down and rationalising it. Sometimes it can seem worse, but it does, a lot of the time, you are right, it can help to think, okay, actually, what is the worst that could happen? And it makes you realise it's not so awful.
No, yeah. But you have to write it down. I think it's so important that you write down what the problem is and then how you can maybe deal with the problem.
I haven't tried that. I've only done it when you're thinking about it in your head.
No, because what happens is your head starts to create all sorts of wonderful fictions.
Yeah.
And your head is great.
You've got
and like you're an actress, and you're creative, so I'm sure your imagination is amazing.
Like, completely runs away with itself.
That's it, exactly. And
It's not in a good way when it's to do with stress, but it goes completely mad.
but if you write it down, suddenly when you write it down and you have to actually write down what the problem is, you start to think about the problem in a more rational way, and it's there in black and white in front of you, and you can say, oh, well, maybe if I did this, I could deal with it. But you have to, and not on a computer screen either. I think you need to get a pen and paper. It's like, it's really primitive. You're accessing a different part of your brain, I think.
And yeah, because my counsellor said if you're feeling really stressed or any sort of emotion, like if you're feeling really angry or upset, a good idea is to write it down. But she said the other thing to try is to write it with the hand that you don't normally write with. So if you're right-handed, you'll write with your left hand because you can't process it in the same way or something.
Yeah. No, I
so it'll
agree
tap
with that.
into a more primitive side of you, and it will help get the emotions out.
Yeah.
So even if you're not necessarily thinking, right, how am I going to deal with this, just the fact of getting them out and written down helps to deal with them.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Although I think I'd stress out about the fact that I can't write with my left hand.
How messy it looks.
Yeah, exactly. Build on my stress. But it does absolutely make sense that you have to. It's like with the work and stuff, actually. It's interesting because I never really thought about writing everything down. But if I had to brainstorm something at work, I would do that. I would write it all down and come up with all the different solutions and what that, how that works. So it does absolutely make sense to kind of put it towards do it for stress rather than just work related. Yeah,
and then just get it out off your mind, because I always felt a bit, I don't really want it written down, but then as she said, you can just burn it afterwards or rip it up and throw it away. You don't have to keep it. It is just the process of doing it that's the thing that helps.
You're then accessing, I think, the creative part of your brain too. You're allowing yourself to come up with a solution, because you have the rational part of your brain sees it written down and says, okay, I can deal with this. Now it's tangible. It's real.
Yeah, it's something there.
Yeah. So the rational side, so you'll actually get both the creative side and the rational side of your brain working together to solve the problem, rather than letting one of them go off on a tangent and, find all sorts of other wonderful things that could be going horribly wrong as well. So
yeah. But no, I definitely think that writing down's a good one. The other one for me is, as you said, Jen, with the yoga. I find that really good.
Yeah, I think for me it's just taking that time out. Actually, I'd use this thing called Yoga with Adrian, and all the time.
That's the one I use.
You use that. She's always like, congratulate yourself for taking the time out to CTU. And I'm like, yes, well done, Jen. I'm taking the time out for me.
There's no pressure with her, because she's always like, if you're not up to doing it today, that's fine. You can do it however you feel you can do it. And I think this is all right. I can do it. Yeah,
exactly. And there's so many different ones you can choose. Like, she does ones where everything's on the floor. And
it's brilliant.
It's really, really good. So I really look forward to that, because without doubt, I feel better after doing that. Even if there's loads of stuff going on, at least I know that I've had that half an hour just to that kind of really clears my mind, actually, because I think I'm focusing so much on what she's saying and on my breathing. Just taking that half an hour out of maybe feeling stressed can help.
That's what I find, because it's not meditation and you're sitting there and you're actually doing something. So even though it's only simple movements, I find that that's enough to distract my brain. So I'm just focused on the breath and how I'm moving.
Yeah.
And she is quite calming, and she's got that cute little dog as well.
yeah, she does.
Benji.
Yes.
So I definitely find yoga, and if I can do sort of gentle exercises, helps.
I find swimming is good as well, because my walking is bad. The swimming is great because I can use my arms to do it, and you focus on what you're doing, on moving your arms, and it's a bit like the yoga. It's a similar type thing. You're more focused on the movement rather than what you're thinking about. So
because I still can't swim. That still hasn't gone well, but I've started going to aqua yoga classes.
Aqua yoga?
Yeah, it's so relaxing.
Oh, that
sounds
really good.
It's in a hydro pool. It's at the local MS centre.
Oh,
and
right.
Most of the time it's actually one-on-one. They only have it one-on-one or with two people. And it's an hour. So you have the beginning bit, you just sit and do the breathing and maybe some very gentle stretches. Then you go into the main pool area and sort of do like a full yoga practice. And then there's this little area that has a little jacuzzi type system. So you sit and do breathing at the end of it, and it is so relaxing.
That sounds amazing.
Because it's a hydro pool, you don't have to worry about getting cold.
No, that sounds amazing.
So I haven't done the swimming, but I've found aqua yoga.
I've just recently bought something called an air walker, which is
What's
really
that?
interesting. It sounds a bit funny, doesn't it? But it's really, really good. I found it just on like eBay or something, and I was like, when I used to go to the gym, which I haven't been to the gym in a few years now, I obviously can struggle with treadmills because I can't walk. I was finding that the steppers were getting difficult and all this kind of stuff. So I found out at the gym that the only thing I can really use is like the cross trainer, you know, the one that uses your legs and arms to kind of, you push forward with your arms and it moves your legs. I know what you like mean. Ski machine, I used to call them ski machines.
Yes, it's all working together.
It's all working together. Well, this air walker is like that, but with no resistance.
Okay.
So it's I love it, actually. I've been trying to do kind of 10 minutes a day, and it's like I put my earphones on, listen to a podcast or something, and then I just, because there's no resistance, you just move your arms. My arms are the ones that are kind of easier for me than my legs, but that then moves your legs, and I feel like I'm walking. It's amazing. I feel like, or like I'm running. It depends how fast you go.
Wow.
But suddenly I'm using my legs in a way that I haven't used them for years, and it's amazing. I really am enjoying it. I don't know how much it's getting my heart rate up, but I'm assuming it's a little bit, because I kind of come off of it feeling a bit tired.
Yeah, you're
I'm
still
not getting
doing the
sweaty.
movement.
Yeah, and again, that's quite meditative almost, because although I'm
It
listening
sounds
to my music,
relaxing.
I'm kind of going back forth with my arms and my legs, and again,
It sounds really nice.
It is. It's really good. I really like it. It's really good. So I think exercise is a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever kind of exercise, whether it's swimming or yoga or walking or whatever, that helps you. Just having that time to take time to yourself can really help with stress.
And it's also reconnecting the body with the mind then as well, if you're focusing on the breath and things at the same time.
Yeah.
I think like the last one for me is probably just getting outside. Even if it's just sitting in the garden and being in nature and listening to the birds and things, I find that helps too.
The beach the last week has been incredible. Hearing the waves and the smell and the sound is just incredible.
Oh, the pictures that you put up, you couldn't not feel relaxed looking at that. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It looked amazing, and I'm so impressed that you had some hot sunshine, because I think when you posted that, it was like really miserable here. I'm on the east coast of England, so it was just really miserable and awful. I was like, is this the same kind of general area? Because it doesn't look anything like how I am at the minute.
Yeah, you look out the window and you think, no. It's not like that here. But I'd agree with that, especially, seaside, countryside. But I always think, even if you can't get far, just sitting in the garden and listening to the birds and watching the clouds and things can really help as well. It makes things not seem quite as big.
Yes.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And you'll find me, if it's sunny today, I'm going to be sitting out in the back of the house, and I'll be watching the trees, listening to the birds, and I don't know, I love it.
It's not looking sunny here.
No, it's not here. It's been raining already.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm looking at it and it's all grey and miserable, but hopefully a bit of sun later. Are there any last tips, or is that everything that we've covered?
I think that's everything.
I think that's all of mine.
Yeah, I think that's it. For me, that's pretty much everything. And you know, the secret, I think, is to do a little bit of all of them, and not just focus on one, because one day the meditation will work, the next day it could be sitting at the beach that'll work, or it'll be sitting outside, but the journaling, you have to have all these practices, I think, in your day, and then one of these tools will help, and you don't know which one is going to work on which day, but you need to have the practice. And I always say that it's a bit like, you know, brushing your teeth, as they say. Just brushing your teeth once doesn't work. But if you make it a daily practice, suddenly you find it's very good for your teeth. But also, if you practice all of these things regularly, it's good for your mental health and to help control your stress. It really works.
It's true, and I think that's a really good point about how things don't always work every day for you. So it's finding the one for that day, because I know some days the meditation I will find much easier, and then I'll be stressed the next day when it doesn't work, because I'm thinking, but it worked yesterday. So then that day it's better for me to get out and sit outside or do a little bit of exercise instead. So it's fitting your mood and where you are mentally on that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Can you just let everyone know where they can find you online?
Yes, I always get caught up in this one, don't I? I'm on Facebook, so I'm on Tripping Through Treacle on Facebook, so at Tripping Through Treacle. I'm on Twitter at Tripping Treacle, and I've got an email out at trippingthroughtreacle@gmail.com.
Brilliant. I really like your new website as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
It looks very nice. It looks so professional.
Oh, good. I didn't do it, so it's a bot one.
Oh, well, it still looks pretty good.
Thank you very much.
And I'm at a 30minutelife.com and at a 30minutelife on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and what's the other one? Instagram. So I'm the same. And if anybody wants to email me, it's robert@a30minutelife.com or a30minutelife@gmail.com.
Brilliant. It is hard to remember them all. I've done that before.
Yeah.
On like Facebook, Instagram.
Sorry. And I always get caught up every single time you ask me on these podcasts. I should write it down, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
No, don't worry. It's the last minute pressure, isn't it, of remembering it.
Well, my blog is trippingthroughtreacle.com. Sorry, I didn't mention that.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, Heather.
That's all right. Thank you so much, you two. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye now. Bye.
And that's it for this month's episode of Dizzycast. We really hope that you've enjoyed the show, and hopefully it's given you some ideas on how to help manage stress as well. If you'd like to get in touch, then please do. You can find us on our website at dinosaursdonkeysandms.com. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook at Dizzy the Donkey. And you can also send us an email at dizzythedonkey@gmail.com. Also, if you have your own ideas for managing stress that we haven't mentioned, then please drop us a line or an email and let us know, and we can mention it in our next episode. Also, in our next episode, we're going to be focusing on heat, as we're nearly into the summer holidays, and heat is something that affects a lot of people with MS. So hopefully we'll see you then. Have a wonderful month, and we'll see you soon. Bye.